Hello, hello. Glad you're with us again for another Sunday morning class. We are working on a series about spiritual life hacks and, basically looking at different spiritual challenges that we face, different struggles, and, or just, facets of being a Christian. And then a life hack is just some kind of, not really a trick, but some very effective way of doing something. So kind of a current terminology, but we've looked at a few so far, and so we're going to look at another one today. When life is full of uncertainty, and again we've been referencing and kind of drawing on as a resource a book with the title Spiritual Life Hacks, and it's been very helpful, and I hope it's been good for you. So today is about uncertainty, not knowing something. So you think about knowledge, and in our day and age, this is called the information age. And I read something in the book that's kind of hard to believe, but it mentioned that we are either at or we're approaching a time when human knowledge, is doubling every, I think it said 11 or 12 hours. I mean, I kind of to kind of cushion that a little bit. Just to think that human knowledge, would be doubling every day. That's hard for me to get my head around.
I was thinking about contacting the author to find out which humans are doubling their knowledge.
Where is it?
Mine takes more than a day. It usually takes a little while. But no, yeah, I get the concept of human knowledge as a whole, just what we find out as a human race advances in whatever technology, science, whatever it is that we come up with. And isn't it interesting that we're doubling our information every day, but yet we're still no closer to really understanding even a portion of what God knows, what He knew when He created everything. And but yeah, my information is not doubling every day.
I was reading about predictions that were completely wrong. If you just Google predictions for the year 2020, it's kind of funny the things you come across, because going back even early 1900s, I think this might have been predicted then. I can't remember how far back it was predicted, but it's basically the idea that by 2020 we would be able to through genetic engineering, through other methods, we would be able to train animals like chimps and maybe apes to do menial human tasks. So really, the idea of even driving a car, like a chimp chauffeur or an ape chauffeur, or somebody to mow your ape, like an Uber driver, but it's your pet.
It's an animal.
Your animal, and you can train your animal to mow your lawn. I mean,
if you don't tip them enough, they'll start throwing stuff at you. You don't want them to throw at you.
It could get ugly.
They could get ugly real quick.
But it's funny to read about what what people thought we could accomplish by 2020, and it really is. There are some amazing things that human race has accomplished, and the things we know, but it's also kind of laughable the things we don't know. There's so much that's not known, that genes can be manipulated, but we cannot even create life yet. Can't make anything come to life.
Well, even in movies that predicted even at the year 2000, like what they thought it would be like, back when the Jetsons cartoon was made, I'm sure they thought by now we'd be floating around in the sky and driving up in the sky and all that kind of stuff. I like those different things you might see on social media or on the internet, where it's like what we thought would happen in 2020, and then it shows something that like is so goofy that we still do, or we still don't have right in the year 2020.
Right.
And I think in some aspects, in certain areas, we may think we've come far, but we're still, we got all this information coming in, or we think we know what's going to happen or what could happen, and we're still so far from it.
Yeah, it's weird. Predictions are, when the quarantine happened in March, one thing I was looking at was the housing market, and there was a lot of prediction that because of the quarantine and just everything that's going on, that the housing market would tank, and it did just the opposite. It kind of boomed, and so people continue to buy houses, but just predictions. I mean, Vegas makes a lot of money off people who think they can predict a sports outcome, and I've watched a fair amount of sports, and it's amazing how just when you think you know what's going to happen, it doesn't. So
nobody got the ear thing way back when, the Holyfield and
yeah, nobody predicted
nobody
that.
bet on that one. You think you know what's going to happen, and then you get somebody's ear get bit off. So
going back a few years.
Exactly, that's back there. I remember when that happened. I thought
that's pretty wild.
These grown men. I remember sitting in the living room of my aunt and uncle's house and thinking, did that just happen?
Right.
I think that still kind of happens to us as a whole. We're like, wait a minute, I didn't see that one coming. So we got to be careful about the things that we think we know.
Yeah, and so when you stop and think about what we stress about, what we worry about, oftentimes it is our fear of the future, of what we don't know. What's going to happen in the future, and no one. I mean, we can only predict and guess, but those are stressful things in our lives. We wonder, what if this happens? What if that happens? Or we may wonder, how am I going to, solve this problem in my life? But people worry about, what if I lose my job? What if, and of course with the COVID, what if my parents or grandparents or a loved one, gets it and is hospitalized or dies? What if I have an accident? What if I'm disabled? And so all these what ifs that we worry about, and that's a common thing. No one's immune to it, but so it kind of comes. It's ironic that we know so much, but no one knows the future. None of us do, anyway. So there is one that knows the future, and that's where we're headed with this. But we don't. We don't know what's going to happen. So, when you stop and think about Bible, people in the Bible and struggles that they had, and I some came to mind for me, examples of people who felt that they felt inadequate, or they felt nervous, or they worried because they didn't know about what would happen. And we don't have a lot on this one, but Noah, I'm very confident Noah had some questions about how's this all going to work. He's going to build this ark, and it took years to build it. And Noah didn't know the future. He just followed what God told him. But I'm sure there were times he wondered if he was up to the task. Abraham and Sarah had a lot of problems with the future, because God told them they would have basically a child, and they finally went about, having a child without God, really, Ishmael. And they probably thought they were doing God a favor and solving a problem, but they created a mess. Moses definitely, God calls him to go to Pharaoh, and his head's spinning, worrying about, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if they don't believe me? What if, I'm not going to know what to say? And just on and on, you have one after the other that they were worried and uncertain about the future.
I think one of those too, I could just picture a closed room full of uncertainty when the disciples thought, now wait a minute, I thought that guy was supposed to be our king, and he just died on a cross. What are we supposed to do? I mean, we are uncertain about the future, because Jesus was telling them exactly, what was going on, that he was going to have to die for everyone. I mean, they went through, but they just really didn't exactly comprehend what was going on. So I imagine they're thinking, we've been following this guy for these years, and we don't know what the future holds at this point in time.
Yeah.
Until he came back.
And then what got crazy is when Jesus is explaining to them what was going to happen, and he's going to die, and all these, that was not in their realm of what they could even conceptualize. They talk about confusing. They were plenty confused because they didn't know. And then when Jesus was crucified, of course, they just fell apart, deserted, denied. So, one thing that we want to point out in this class today is really the key of today's class in a nutshell is the fact that God does know. God knows. And some scriptures that remind us of that. One is Psalm 142 verse 3. And this is David. It's a pretty good psalm if you've ever been struggling or worrying. Psalm 142:3, the whole psalm kind of this is David's angst about his enemies and what's going to happen. He's crying out to God. But in verse 3, he makes a statement. He says, when my spirit faints within me. And that, that's something we can identify with. This is when your strength and your courage just kind of melts because you're afraid of what's coming. You're afraid of what might happen. And David says, when my spirit faints within me, you know my way. And then to finish out the verse, he says, in the path where I walk, they have hidden a trap for me. David's worried about where's that trap? Where is the next, danger coming from? And David says he's so afraid, but he honors God and confesses that God knows what's ahead. So, he finds comfort in that. And then John 16:30 is another example. And this is if you look at John 16 and really a couple chapters before, this is Jesus having Passover. He institutes the Lord's Supper. A lot happens here at the end of the book of John. But at that night, Jesus is kind of given one of his final lessons to his apostles. And they're confused by things he's saying. And they even kind of whisper among themselves. But then things get a little clearer. And they make this statement, John 16:30. Now we know that you know all things and do not need anyone to question you. This is why we believe that you came from God. So there's a lot they don't know, the apostles. And Jesus is trying to tell them it's about to get tough. And they have no clue. But they do make a good statement, because they say to Jesus, hey, we don't know, we're confused, but you know. You're the one that knows.
And it's what a relief that is. I mean, I guess I kind of look back to whenever I was younger. I mean, children are referred to as having the kind of faith that we as adults need. We need to have that all-trusting faith in God and what he's going to do. And I remember as a kid, I don't ever remember thinking, it wasn't my responsibility to find out where the food was going to come from or how the bills were going to get paid. So that wasn't my worry. But when we ultimately look at things, we should have that kind of faith and trust in God that when things seem uncertain. I didn't know how the bills were going to get paid, but I trusted in God that, or I trusted in my parents that they were going to take care of the things because that was their role. And so, so many times, in the Bible, God will, mention, well, if you think you can give good gifts, or if your father, or if you're not going to deprive your children of good things, what makes you think I am? And I think when we look at it, our current events or things that are currently going on with us, and we give them over, kind of give them up in that sense to God, and put our trust there where we have uncertainty because we don't necessarily know where that trap's going to be. We don't know how this is going to play out, but we know that God knows, and it's kind of a relief for us, lets us off the hook of something we really should have been holding on to anyways.
Yeah, and I know my tendency is to focus on what I'm worried about, and I do two things. I focus on that, and then I ask God for help. And I probably do those two quite a bit. Here's the problem. Here's the solution. But there is this piece in the middle that we're talking about today that I don't think I focus on enough, and that is God knows. He knows the problem I'm dealing with. He knows the past. He knows, he sees the whole picture and the future. He knows it all. And that's a piece I don't think about enough, because when you do think about that, like we're talking about right now, it's pretty comforting to think he sees it all. He got it all. And he's in charge. It's just an extra, that's an added layer of comfort, because it's one thing to cry out for help. That's, you know, when you cry out for help, we're calling out to the right place, which is God, but that doesn't mean we're anchoring, you know what I mean, to a comforting. We're not necessarily trusting when we, just because we cry out to God for help. And that's kind of what this one's about. John, another place I would take you to, I think this one's pretty good. John 21:15. And this is after Jesus has been crucified, after the resurrection. But so it's in those days between the resurrection and between when Jesus goes back to heaven. And this is kind of known as the Jesus kind of reestablishes Peter, restores him, but he has this quick kind of exchange with him. And John 21:15 says, when they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And of course that ties back to just a few days earlier when Jesus was having that long, Passover communion, and he was trying to tell his apostles a lot of things, and he was telling them, he was going to be betrayed and turned over to Gentiles. And Peter made a statement. Essentially, Peter's statement was, if all these others apostles desert you, I won't. I'll die for you. That's if you really analyze it, that's what Peter was trying to say. And here Jesus, and of course he denied him 3 times, and Jesus told him he would, but here Jesus comes back and asks him, do you love me more than these? You said you would stick with me to the very end, and all that. And so Jesus comes back and asks him, and Peter, this really troubles Peter, because he's being humbled, and he's super humbled by this point. But Peter's response, he says, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And then Jesus said, "Feed my lambs." And the word love, Jesus, we have 2 different words for love here that's used back and forth. Jesus is asking, "Do you love me unconditionally?" Agape. And Peter says, I like you, phileo. It's translated love. But even aside from that, what I key on here is Peter makes this statement, you know that I love you. And it's a real contrast to just days earlier when Jesus was saying, here's what's going to happen, guys. It's going to get bad. And Peter says, hey, I will do this. Peter, he really got on a soapbox and said, here's what I'm going to do. And now Peter, he's not so confident now, but his confidence is in what Jesus knows. So he's been humbled. He's done a real 180 here, and so it's a little different as far as it's not Peter finding comfort in God's knowledge, but it's a great acknowledgement of Peter learned a hard lesson, and what he learned was he doesn't know. Peter himself doesn't know. That's what he learned. He thought he knew what he was going to do and how the future would unfold, and it was nothing like that. And what he learned was he doesn't know, but Jesus does know. And that's a powerful lesson.
Yeah, I mean, and even could have been one of those spirit is willing, flesh is weak. I mean, Jesus, you know that I love you. I wanted to die for you in the moment, but my flesh, overcame me when push came to shove. And, so he, again, is restored here. And, even more so seeing, the resurrected Christ, helps out with that. Definitely, he talks about the resurrection and So if we see him resurrected and said, I'm going to go prepare a place, and that all goes on later on, you kind of think, well, maybe this physical stuff isn't all what it's cracked up to be, or I know proof now that there's something in store beyond this.
And also, if you take some encouragement from the story of Peter, because if you ever find yourself, I think we all look back, and the older we get, we see how many times we failed, and we see the older you get, the more regrets you have of shortcomings and sins and all of that. And so take some courage and comfort in Peter. He failed. He was told he was going to fail, and he did fail 3 times, and yet he learns from that, and he grows from that, and that's what we need to do. So whatever's happened in your past, grow from it. Remember, Peter's the one that he wasn't courageous when he denied Jesus, but he still he came back. He learned from that. He was restored, and he had great courage on the day of Pentecost. Throughout his life, preaching the gospel after Jesus was back in heaven. And then tradition, this isn't scripture that tells us this, but tradition, there is some historical evidence that say that Peter was martyred by crucifixion, and in addition that he requested to be crucified. They were going to crucify him, and did. And this is what some history tells us, and that he requested to be crucified upside down, claiming not worthy to be crucified the same way Jesus was. Now, I don't know that that's true, but it definitely matches what we read about, Peter late. You read in the book of Acts, and he's really grown. And so that's what we want to do. So, to me, from this lesson today, the life hack is really just 2 words to remember. If you can remember the 2 words, God knows, then that's a powerful thing. And for me, what I will do with this is in the future, because there are always times when you're in deep worry, maybe not even a total crisis, but you're really, really worried, and you don't know what to pray. And we know the Spirit intercedes as well, but I intend to use this as a tool to pray, God, and just kind of sit with that, because there's a lot of power and a lot of comfort in those 3 words, God,
I think one thing that, just to add to this as well, so we've looked at it on the side of uncertainty when we're faced, and it's obvious uncertainty, but I got to thinking when we were going through this that sometimes there's an uncertainty that we're blinded to. And what I mean by that is when we plan for things without, I'll say it this way, consulting God, without going through God. So we plan and we assume that we know the future. We assume we know how many beats that we have left in our heart. We assume that we know how many days we have left on this earth, and we don't give account, give thought to God's word and how he wants us to live. And so some might say, well, let me get this in order, and then, then I feel like I can really give my life over to God, or I can really start following him better. I just, I want to do these couple of things, and I want to go travel, and then I can settle down and really work and get involved in the church. Whatever the case is, we know that in James in chapter 4, in verse 13, he says, come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make profit. And in verse 14, yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? For you are a mist that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance, and all such boasting is evil. So I just wanted to look at a couple of different ways, because maybe you're not dealing with uncertainty. Maybe you think that you're fine. You're prospering even in this time. Some have lost jobs, some aren't. Some can work from home, and so really monetarily, physically, nothing has been affected. But maybe that's not the best place for you to be in, because you've taken comfort in thinking that everything's going to be fine when we don't know what the future holds. So that doesn't necessarily mean we can't go out and try and grow our business or improve our career or our occupational position, whatever we're in. It just means that shouldn't be where our certainty is. Our certainty isn't in our job or our wealth or our material things. Our certainty should be in the hope and the promise that God gives us for the future, that He only knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that, when you get that mindset, then you're ready to anchor to God. We keep Him where He belongs. He's in charge. He's driving. We're not. We're, for the most part, we're kind of along for the ride, and we need to be submissive to God and trusting. So keep at it. Keep it up. And hope this has been some encouragement to you today. And here in a few minutes, we'll broadcast our worship, and we look forward to that.